Episode 27, Detection, starts with Jetfire and Smokescreen having an arm wrestling contest. Rather amusingly, Alexis cheers for both of them, which Carlos finds odd. Jetfire proves the victor, for the third time in a row. All seems well on the home front. On the moon, Thrust begins to explain the Decepticons' failures, both before his arrival and after. The cons have greater firepower and are more ruthless, but the Autobots work as a coherent unit. Megatron is infuriated at this accusation, but Thrust continues his explanation despite the Starsaber being held in his face. He says that he'd like to test his theory, but Demolisher and Cyclonus rail against him. Thrust turns this to his advantage, saying that the fact that those two keep arguing with him is proof of what he's saying. Finally, Megatron begins to listen, especially after Thrust mentions more troops that will be arriving shortly. All the while, Sideways watches on, frustrated that Thrust is beginning to dismantle his carefully laid plans to keep the war going for as long as possible. Thrust looks at the ninja bot, his suspicions only growing. A mysterious ship flies through space, passing Neptune. The bots, back on Earth, begin building a ship, directed by Red Alert. Jetfire is not present, and Hotshot decides to seek out his vice commander. The kids ask about the bots' long-term plans, and Hotshot says that, yes, they'll eventually return to Cybertron once the minicons are safe. Then Carlos wonders about Jetfire's lackadaisical attitude, especially considering his rank. Alexis agrees he's not much like Optimus. However, as the kids and Hotshot arrive, they discover that Jetfire isn't slacking off. He's studying footage of his team's past battles from before he arrived on Earth. When Sideways pops up on the screen, Jetfire is intrigued. He doesn't recognize the self-proclaimed Drifter as either a bot or a con. On the moon, Sideways manipulates Demolisher into slagging Thrust, framing it as the ultimate proof of the Tank Con's loyalty to Megatron. Demolisher eventually agrees wholeheartedly. Jetfire continues investigating Sideways and discovers the times the mysterious robots sabotaged the cons while seemingly being on their side. Thrust stands outside, believing he's been summoned by Megatron. However, it turns out to be a trap set by Demolisher, who throws the tactician out of the base. Sideways sneaks off to make a report to his mysterious master, but is discovered by Starscream. Sideways tries to shoot Starscream, but misses. The other cons enter after Starscream. Demolisher is confused at first until Thrust comes back in and reveals that he knows Sideways has been pitting the cons against each other. Then, Megatron enters, pleased with Thrust's efforts. As he's about to slag Sideways, the spy triggers a booby trap. Thrust pursues the fleeing Sideways. Starscream attempts to join, but Megatron says to let Thrust prove himself. Thrust corners Sideways. Jetfire, the kids, and Hotshot continue discussing the mystery. Alexis realizes that Sideways hasn't been claiming the minicons for himself, despite having multiple opportunities. And though he's clearly not loyal to the cons, he can't be trusted to join the bots again, either. Thrust turns invisible and attacks Sideways from the shadows. He reappears and grapples the traitor. Megatron watches on, ordering Sideways' termination. In that moment, however, Sideways reveals that he's no ordinary Transformer, turning into a swarm of what look to be nanobots, before reforming away from Thrust. Megatron leaps forward and cuts him in two with the Starsaber, but Sideways just reforms again. The other cons fire on him, but it has no effect. Megatron slashes out with the Starsaber again, seemingly destroying Sideways. However, he reconstitutes himself partially, taunting and cackling at Megatron. He then flies off, saying that the Starsaber and Skyboom's shield are mere toys to him. He cackles that he's eager to see which side will win the race for the minicons, and then vanishes into space. Later, the bots and cons face each other on a beach. As they fight, the mysterious ship from earlier enters Earth's atmosphere, approaching the battle's location. With that, the episode ends. Detection is excellent. Sideways is seemingly exposed and yet remains a mystery. We see just how powerful he is, seeing that he could have ended the war personally long ago. His motives are still ambiguous, and that leads to a great reveal later on. A lot of focus on the Decepticons, which again, I love, and Jetfire shows that he's not a slacker, studying his opponents and learning from past battles. And we set up the plot of the next two episodes, with the strange ship, the second image from cyberspace after Jetfire, drawing near to the conflict. This, of course, leads directly into episode 28, Awakening. The mysterious ship approaches, looming over the beach. The bots and cons fire on each other. Then, a great rumbling shakes the ground. A massive shape appears over the horizon, a gargantuan, flying warship. It enters the water and transforms into an aircraft carrier. Thrust reveals that the Titan is named Tidal Wave, one of the allies Thrust mentioned in the last episode, and that the tide has now turned. Thrust orders Tidal Wave to demonstrate his power, and the warship rains down a volley on the Autobots, showcasing immense firepower. The bots are pinned down. Smokescreen tries to shoot back but is hit by Cyclonus. Starscream swoops in and Jetfire begins an aerial battle with him. Thrust watches the fracas with wicked glee. Hotshot and Blur enter their Power Links modes and make their way towards Tidal Wave. They're able to evade blaster fire from the other cons thanks to their allies' cover fire. The pair enter the water, planning to attack Tidal Wave from below. Jetfire and Starscream continue their fight, Thrust joining in to snipe Jetfire from behind. However, Jetfire transforms and attempts to dunk Thrust in the drink. The tactician uses his invisibility to trick Jetfire into letting go. Jetfire tries to draw Tidal Wave's fire, but Thrust and Inferno, his minicon, attack from behind. Blur and Hotshot implement their plan, knocking Tidal Wave over. It seems to be over for the cons. At that moment, two minicon signals activate simultaneously, joining the one that started this battle. Alexis is unable to piece together what this all means at first. The other minicons tell the kids that one of the new ones is near the Autobot base. These panels are blue. The one in the base, the one on the beach, and the one in a chasm on the moon, another chasm, activate in sync. The bots and cons, however, don't notice. Megatron is angry at Thrust, thinking Tidal Wave is an absolute failure. The Titan sinks beneath the surface, but when Thrust calls out to him, he does something unexpected. He transforms. Alexis keeps tracking the new minicons. When she discovers the third one is on the moon, Sideways appears on the monitor. The boys and minicons hunt down the minicon near the base. Sideways reveals that these minicons form the third and final weapon, the Requiem Blaster. Sideways tells them that the blaster can turn the tide of battle in the bots' favor, which confuses Alexis and Red Alert, who think that the battle's going well. Red demands to know whose side Sideways is on, but the Drifter remains mysterious, telling them that if they wish to be victorious, they'll listen. He then ends the transmission. Red reluctantly admits that Sideways is likely being honest this time, and regardless, they can't ignore what he said. Cyclonus is downed, the fight continuing to go well, until Tidal Wave emerges from the ocean in robot mode. An Omega Supreme-sized robot. Tidal Wave is gigantic in this early mini-arc. He will, unfortunately, shrink eventually, though, but for now he's quite an impressive specimen. He floats in the air and rains down fire on the Autobots. As the boys continue their search, Fred falls through the ground. Unfortunately, he's alive, and has discovered a hidden flight of stairs. Tidal Wave continues his attack, and the bots plan a counterattack. Optimus and Jetfire power links and fly towards their giant foe. The kids find the minicon at the base, which activates, revealing himself to be Skyblast, the first Requiem Blaster minicon. Optimus loses his weapon and tries to retrieve it, only to be blasted out of the sky by Tidal Wave. Skyblast is terrified of the kids and opens fire on them when Highwire approaches. He then runs away. Tidal Wave looms over a prone Optimus, but the other bots cover their leader's retreat. The battle continues to go poorly, and the boys pursue Skyblast through the tunnels. With a final ominous shot of Tidal Wave, the episode draws to a close on a cliffhanger. I'll discuss this two-parter as one episode, so let's advance on to Desperate. We begin with the final sequence of the previous episode. Skyblast fires at the kids again, seemingly as scared of his own abilities as he is of them. Rad tries to calm him down and is able to succeed, despite Perceptor merging and frightening Skyblast once more. Optimus orders a retreat, but Hotshot and Smokescreen don't listen, attempting to use the Skyboom shield to deflect Tidal Wave's attack. It doesn't go well, and Thrust and Megatron gloat as they watch on. Optimus delivers a kick to Tidal Wave's throat, so Megatron sends the other cons in. Tidal Wave is able to recover and chases Optimus into the sky, where Thrust and the flying minicons await. Alexis is frustrated and terrified for her friends' lives. The boys arrive with Skyblast, who continues to be scared. Optimus is swarmed by all the aerial Decepticons. Offering Megatron the final blow, Thrust orders Tidal Wave to merge with their leader. With both leaders souped up, they prepare for battle while the other bots and cons, sans Thrust, fight. Red attempts to mobilize, but Alexis stops him. She tries to convince Skyblast to help, but he refuses. Rad is able to convince the minicon by promising to stick by him, and the two of them, Carlos and Red, warp to the battlefield. Alexis tells the Autobots to seek out Red Alert. Starscream tries to take out Smokescreen, but Scavenger saves him. Hotshot is then pursued by Cyclonus. Thrust spies Red and tries to attack him, but is stopped by Blur. The Autobot is no match, but fortunately Red Alert steps in. Megatron draws the Starsaber and taunts Optimus. Smokescreen launches the shield into Optimus's hands, and he uses it to protect himself from the attacking Minicons. Carlos gets mad at Skyblast in action, seeing his friends in danger. Rad tries to reason that the Minicons don't want to fight and they can't force it, but Carlos points out that they need the Minicons to stop the Decepticons. Red Alert is taken down by a mortar. Hotshot saves the kids from an attack and is able to convince Skyblast to act. The Minicon sends out a signal to his two comrades in the form of a strange, mechanical song. All on the battlefield react to the sound in confusion. The Skyboom Shield and Starsaber begin to act of their own accord, being drawn towards each other. This causes a beam that activates one of the other two Requiem Minicons, Payload. Thrust attempts to grab him but is stopped temporarily by Blur. Megatron forces Jetfire and Optimus to unlink, Prime beginning to plummet to the ground far below. The third Minicon, Astroscope, awakens, and the three merge into the Requiem Blaster. Thrust tries to grab it at the same time as Optimus. In the scuffle, Optimus pulls the trigger, hits Megatron, then kicks Thrust away. He uses the incredible power of the blaster to slow his descent, evaporating part of the ocean with the blast and landing safely. And with that, this two-parter ends. Pretty good, though it is let down by a couple things. First, Fred is extra annoying this go-round. Normally, his comedy is eye-roll inducing, but this time it was just wretched. Second, the animation is inconsistent. Third, Tidal Wave doesn't really feel like an agent unto himself, more like a giant drone under Thrust's control. This will change later, but though he's a fearsome adversary in this two-parter, he's less of a character and more of a weapon. And finally, I'm not a huge fan of the Requiem Blaster being relegated to 2 episodes, or really one long episode, when the Starsaber took a whole season and the Skyboom Shield half a season to be formed. However, I do understand that the story is beginning to pick up the pace, and the writers clearly want the story to begin moving in a different direction, moving away from the Minicon hunt almost entirely, with a couple exceptions. Though even those are going to be more focused on other things. So another season-long treasure hunt for a Minicon weapon wasn't really on the cards. It does unfortunately make Skyblast's summoning of his comrades something of a deus ex machina, but considering some reveals about the Minicons later on, I am willing to forgive this in hindsight. Showing Skyblast being terrified of his own powers is also really cool and kind of recontextualized Downshift's, the first of the Skyboom Minicon, his actions last season. It also foreshadows that same reveal about the Minicons I just mentioned. So, Awakening and Desperate, pretty good, though not perfect. Moving on to what is fortunately the last episode of the show I consider to be bad, Runaway. We open with Megatron undergoing a tune-up from the captive Minicons, while the others look on. Thrust attempts to use the stars to convince Megatron of the surety of his victory again, but the Decepticon leader is growing tired of these assurances, saying that if Thrust wishes to prove himself, he'll claim the Requiem Blaster at any cost. At the Autobot base, Blur, Hotshot, and Jetfire are attempting to convince Optimus that the blaster should be used consistently, taking into consideration just how powerful it is. Red Alert and Scavenger are more reserved in their opinions, and Optimus is torn. He knows that his team desperately needs an edge. They can't keep pulling tricks out of a hat like they have the last few times. Jetfire, Jet Optimus, and even the blaster itself are no longer a surprise, so the Decepticons can plan to counter them. Thus, using the blaster's mighty power might just be enough to turn the tide permanently. However, unlike many of the Minicons, the 3 that make up the blaster don't seem to have any desire for warfare, and only stepped in last time after much convincing. Optimus has never seen the Minicons as weapons, and though he has eagerly accepted their willing help in the past, imposing his will on the Minicons is a bit of a different story. Unfortunately, this discussion, which could have been an interesting focus for the episode, is rendered moot by the kids sneaking the Minicons out. They rationalize this action by saying if they don't do something, the Minicons may be forced to be a weapon. Do you all just not trust your allies to do the right thing? How often has Optimus, not to mention the others, proven that he is willing to protect the Minicons from harm? How often have you all seen that the Minicons choose to fight alongside the Autobots? Look, Hotshot can be thoughtless at times, Blur only recently came around to the idea of Minicons as beings rather than tools, and y'all don't know Jetfire as well as the others, this is all true, but who's the guy who makes the ultimate decisions? Who's the top brass? The head honcho? The big cheese?
Optimus Prime. You should know the Autobot leader well enough by now that you should trust that he'll make the fairest decision. And you should know that the other bots trust Optimus enough to follow his lead, even if they might disagree. So that's my first issue with this episode's premise. The kids don't trust the bots, and I find that honestly infuriating and idiotic. But the second reason is far worse. They're taking the minicons out of a highly secure alien military installation to... well, you'll see where they're taking them in a second. But right now, the assumption is that the Autobots might force the minicons to fight. But do you know who will? The Decepticons. And you've just made it 20 times easier for the bad guys to get their hands on the most powerful weapon in the universe. Are you dumb? Did none of you think this through? Look, Billy, Fred, Carlos, them I can see doing a stupid thing like this. Rad 50-50. But Alexis? Girl, really? Also, what kind of hypocrisy is this, Lexi? You were one of the ones advocating for the minicons to link up and help last episode. This is a catastrophically dumb move, and it proves to be a problem almost immediately. Thrust hacks into Earth's satellite network and begins scanning the globe, hoping that the minicons might be found outside the base so he can seize them when no one expects it. Attacking the base or waiting until a fight would just be unnecessarily risky, so he chooses to bide his time. Back at the Autobot base, Optimus tells his men that before he makes a decision, he wants to talk to the minicons, see if an agreement can be made. The fair option. The Optimus Prime option. The option that was always going to be taken, you stupid children. Optimus sends Sparkplug to find the Requiem minicons, but they're gone. Blur then notes that the kids are also suspiciously absent. The kids in Minicon are in a bus station with transportation to Central City, apparently. Say hi to the Flash if you see him. Billy and Fred have some dumb comedy, and then we see the minicons dressed in really bad disguises. One of them, either Skyblast or Payload, because Astroscope has one eye and this one has two, starts flirting with a girl whose dog smells the Energon on him or something. Apparently, she can understand him? The girl offers him a snack, but the dog remains perturbed. Rad then jumps in and says the minicon's on a diet before shuffling him out of the station and towards the bus. Hotshot and Blur return to Optimus and say that the kids aren't on the base at all. The bots mobilize, heading into town, except Jetfire, who Scavenger says sticks out too much, and Scavenger himself, because. Thrust then notices that Optimus has left the base and grows suspicious. Hotshot finds the bus with the minicons on it. The younger bots in red wonder why the kids would do this, but Optimus says that's unimportant. What matters is catching up with them and getting them home. Hotshot's tailing is cut short by a train crossing, but Optimus is able to continue pursuit. Thrust then puts together that Optimus must be following the bus for a reason. Hotshot faces the reality of everyone who's ever lived near a railroad, and Smokescreen has to deal with a typical day in the Phoenix Valley. Red is stuck in traffic, and Blur sticks to the side roads, making the journey longer. The kids disembark from the bus near a cornfield, unfortunately throwing Optimus off the scent. They head to a dilapidated farm beyond the fields, somehow thinking that this run-down shack will be in any way secure against giant alien robots. They home alone the place, setting traps, alarms, and other warning features. Demolisher discovers that Thrust isn't at his post anymore. The tactician has put the pieces together, and the kid's plan is about to implode, as anyone with a brain could have guessed. Thrust arrives at the farm, and the kids and minicons scattered. As expected, the various traps do little more than annoy and delay the Decepticon. Eventually, Thrust reaches the end of his patience, something he and I have in common, and destroys the barn. The kids have nowhere to go. Fortunately for the Society of Stupid, Optimus arrives. Thrust proves powerful and crafty enough that Optimus employs super mode. Not wanting that smoke, Thrust withdraws. The other Autobots finally arrive, and the long-awaited, by me, confrontation happens. Rad tells the boss what they already knew, that some minicons don't like fighting, and Optimus tells the kids what they should already know, that Optimus isn't going to force them to fight and never has. The Autobots agree with their leader, and the episode ends with everyone returning home. And that was Runaway. Man, I hate this episode. Unlike Carnival and Vacation, it wasn't a pointless or filler episode. It was just bad. The kids are idiots. The entire central conflict could have easily been avoided. It introduces unnecessary conflict between the good guys, and it asks the same question for a third time. A few moments of decent comedy, and the bots at least being written in character aside, Runaway is a contender for the worst episode in the show. But there is a silver lining. Every episode after this one is good, and most I would consider to be certified bangers. Episodes 31 and 32 are a two-parter. Past, parts 1 and 2. The episode begins with Hotshot flashing back to a traumatizing experience on Cybertron, wherein a platoon mate by the name of Wheeljack was left for dead. Hotshot had attempted to save his friend, but his sergeant, retroactively named Sentinel, because of course it was, stops him rather violently, saying that the platoon is more important than a single soldier. He is a jerk in every universe except G1. In the present, a new bot arrives, Sideswipe. He's a very eager and reckless young soldier that apparently remembers Blur from back on Cybertron, though Blur himself doesn't remember their encounter at first. Sideswipe then acts out their first encounter, where Blur used his rifle to free the younger bot from a snare, which piques the quieter bot's memory. Turns out, Sideswipe became something of a fanboy for Blur after that, and came to Earth to find him. The kids and Hotshot are amused, but Blur, very much, is not. Then there's a setup for a minor C-plot where Alexis gets on to Billy and Fred for playing video games at the base. I'm not going to talk about that much. It is completely irrelevant to the rest of the story. Sideswipe tries to help Blur with manual labor, but proves clumsy and only irritates Blur further. However, though Blur's not the biggest fan of Sideswipe, he doesn't want the young bot to remain undisciplined. He doesn't think of himself as a teacher, so passes the buck to Hotshot, which Optimus concurs with. Hotshot is reluctant, but obeys. He finds Sideswipe standing guard in the rain and gives him his orders. The pair partake in target practice, where Sideswipe proves inefficient, but effective. They then train outside, where Hotshot continues to prove his superior skill, this time in quick transformation. A mysterious grayish car with a scratched-out Autobot insignia drives down the road, and we return to the past, where Wheeljack calls out for Hotshot. However, it's not his teammate who answers him, but Megatron. Sideswipe and Hotshot have a spark-to-spark, where Hotshot encourages his student to stop trying to be Blur and to instead learn his own capabilities. The mysterious car watches them. Later, when they're driving, the car comes up behind them. They think he's just some reckless driver at first, but it becomes clear that this isn't the case very swiftly, as the car uses a similar ability to thrust to knock Sideswipe off course. Hotshot sees the scarred insignia. Sideswipe links up with his minicon Nightbeat and chases the aggressor, while Hotshot flashes back to his first meeting with Wheeljack, where he was also assigned to be a mentor figure. The pair swiftly became friends, and all seemed well. Then, the memory of Wheeljack's supposed death plays again. Sideswipe keeps chasing the ex-Autobot, who employs the use of holograms to trick Sideswipe and drive him off the road, and down a cliff. Hotshot arrives too late to save his new partner from his old one, and the two come face to face. Hotshot tries to ask for forgiveness, but Wheeljack is beyond any feeling but anger. He tells Hotshot of his rebirth as a Decepticon, revealing that this isn't about revenge, but rather about shaking off his past and truly cementing himself as a loyal soldier of Megatron's. This seems to be a lie, however, as the events later on definitely demonstrate some manner of retributive action. He continues, telling how Megatron saved his life, and now he belongs to the Decepticon leader. He draws his weapon and aims it at his former comrade, ending Part 1. Part 2 picks up right where the first left off, though with some slightly misdubbed dialogue.
Wheeljack fires a shot into Hotshot's chest and vanishes. Hotshot, overcome by his injuries and the events of the day, blacks out, awakening later in the infirmary, having been saved by Sideswipe. Hotshot tries to get up, but Sideswipe tells him he needs to rest. Blur supposes that since the shot was at close range but missed any major systems, the attacker must have been a lousy shot. But Optimus disagrees. Hotshot recalls that day once more, not willing to accept that Wheeljack has turned completely evil, while Optimus tells Blur about Wheeljack, having put the pieces together. Optimus reveals that Hotshot never fully processed the hurt of that day, and now is reliving it all over again. In order to truly grow past it, he needs to face his past and forgive himself. Sideswipe attempts to get through to Hotshot, but despite his best efforts, Hotshot keeps blaming himself. Even recalling how he disobeyed orders and still tried to save Wheeljack doesn't assuage the guilt. As Optimus and Blur continue discussing Wheeljack, Sideswipe rushes in, revealing that Hotshot has run off. Thrust spies the wayward Autobot and pursues him while his teammates try to hail him. Wheeljack and Hotshot meet up at an abandoned factory. The Decepticon compares humanity and Cybertronians, how both races seem perpetually drawn to war and conflict, then says that it's time to officially cast each other off and battle as enemies. Sideswipe and Blur hunt Hotshot down and split up. Wheeljack taunts Hotshot for his reluctance to fight, then makes the first move. It takes a few blows for Hotshot to return, but he's still clearly holding back. Thrust watches the battle from afar, and Sideswipe spies the Jetcon. Wheeljack aims his weapon at Hotshot, but is startled when, instead of drawing his own weapon, Hotshot approaches and puts the cannon directly over his own spark. Now it's Wheeljack's turn to hesitate, even despite knowing Thrust is watching. Sideswipe then steps in, firing on Wheeljack. He misses and hits the factory, causing a fire. Wheeljack then shoots Sideswipe, makes the fire bigger, and holds Sideswipe hostage, wanting to make his enemy relive their shared traumatic memory. This time with Sideswipe. He drags Sideswipe into the fire, wounding Hotshot's leg so he'll move slowly. He chains Sideswipe to a pipe, telling the young bot that Hotshot won't save him. He leaves Sideswipe to die. Thrust attacks Hotshot while he looks for his comrade. Wheeljack is infuriated at Thrust's interference and shoots him down. As Wheeljack climbs out of the conflagration, he's greeted by Megatron. Hotshot sees Sideswipe, who tells him to go, but Hotshot refuses. He's not letting history repeat itself. He evades death by collapsing and exploding metal and frees his new friend. The factory explodes, and for a moment, it seems that Hotshot has failed again. Thankfully, both of them survive. Megatron inducts Wheeljack into his team, despite a wounded Thrust protests. Starscream watches on, intrigued or potentially displeased. Back at base, Sideswipe reveals that he now sees Hotshot as a brother. Alexis, engrossed in the game, doesn't notice until after Sideswipe starts chasing Hotshot for a hug. And with that, Past comes to a close. I love these episodes. I love that Hotshot's growth is continuing, building up to his eventual culmination. And I also love that Thrust and Megatron's seemingly unbreakable trust is slowly but surely beginning to slip. Something that will become very relevant in a few episodes. But now, we move on to one of the best mini-arcs in the show. Episode 33, Sacrifice, begins with Megatron and Thrust discussing a plan, the contents of which are yet a mystery. Megatron relinquishes the Starsaber into Thrust's hands, making it crystal clear that if Thrust fails this time, it will mean termination. The bots, in response to a transmission from the Decepticons, mobilize to a jungle. Hotshot wonders why Optimus chose not to bring the Requiem Blaster, and Jetfire complains about the humidity. Smokescreen and Red Alert, on Optimus's orders, remain behind to protect both the base and the Requiem minicons. The kids have the same debate again, and the bots also argue, though it is slightly more interesting on the robot side, because Hotshot wonders whether or not the cons will call their bluff about actually having the blaster if they're never going to fire it. Scavenger is convinced of the plan, and Jetfire still suspects a trap. His suspicions are confirmed when Starscream swoops in, bearing the Starsaber. Optimus insists the bots let Scream make the first move, and the Decepticon taunts them to come out and face him. Sideswipe and Hotshot think Screamer's just full of himself, but Optimus takes him seriously. Starscream uses the null laser cannon to cause a forest fire. The other cons watch on, Megatron growing impatient. Finally, Optimus orders his men to advance. He links up with Jetfire and flies up to face Starscream. On Megatron's orders, Tidal Wave prepares to attack the Autobot Supreme Commander. However, upon being informed by a binocular Demolisher that Optimus doesn't have the blaster, Megatron diverts Tidal Wave to attack the Autobots below. The Minicons aboard the Behemoth pepper the bots with blaster fire. Demolisher notices that neither Blur nor Hotshot have the blaster either. When Thrust questions about the others, Demolisher brushes him off, calling him Eraserhead, the second of 4 nicknames Thrust will receive throughout this series, having already been called Conehead in Runaway. That one will return later. Megatron tells Demolisher to mind his rank. Thrust then uses Megatron's endorsement to pull rank, sending Demolisher into the fray. Megatron and Thrust notice that Starscream plans to actually fight Optimus in order to prove himself, not just draw him out. Megatron is displeased at this. Starscream taunts Optimus and a storm begins. Thrust is confused, convinced that the Autobot should have used the blaster by now. Of course, being a Decepticon, he can't fathom not using such a powerful weapon, as that's all he sees the Minicons as. He takes off for a closer look, leaving Megatron alone. Back at the Autobot base, the monitors shift from an external view to an internal one, eventually settling on Smokescreen and the Minicons. This frightens both Red Alert and the kids. Red Alert tries to regain control, but he's unable to do so, as the computers are once again under the control of Sideways. Starscream keeps taunting, but Optimus tries to reason with him, asking Starscream what the point of fighting is, a question Scream asks himself back in Rebellion. Starscream replies with typical Decepticon dogma, not wanting to give Optimus an inch and trying to deny the thoughts that he's had 1,000 times, then attacks again. Sideways transmits the image of Smokescreen and the Minicons to Thrust, along with a cryptic message: "There shall never be peace in this universe. There must always be war." Thrust sees Sideways' face in the clouds and convinces himself that it was a hallucination. However, he decides to act on the information about Smokescreen regardless. Optimus continues trying to get through to Starscream, but actually succeeds in getting the Starsaber Minicons to deactivate. Starscream is confused, but draws his own sword to continue the fight. He then calls out for his allies, only to notice that he's alone on the battlefield, surrounded by the other Autobots. The bots point out that he's been abandoned, but Scream denies it multiple times, eventually flying up into the sky and calling for his team over and over. Eventually, he must admit that he has been abandoned, and has something of a mental breakdown because of it. Rad, through Laserbeak, reports that the other cons are attacking the base, having been allowed in thanks to Sideways hacking. The bots return to base, and Starscream is left alone in the rain and mud, screaming up at the sky. The kids greet the bots, hiding an event. The base is entirely trashed. The cons approach Smokescreen's location, bursting through the wall. Megatron, Powerlinks with Tidal Wave and Leader 1, orders Smokescreen to hand over the Requiem Minicons. Smokescreen attacks Thrust and challenges Megatron. The other cons have Red Alert pinned down when the others arrive. A blood-curdling scream echoes through the base as Megatron throws an injured Smokescreen to the ground. He forces the Minicons to form the blaster. Optimus rushes in with the others. Megatron aims the blaster at them, beginning to pontificate on the nature of the Minicon weapons, how a handful of little Minicons could form the greatest weapons in the universe. As Megatron prepares to fire on Optimus, Smokescreen uses his grapple line to divert the blaster. However, this move proves to be fatal, as Smokescreen is blasted through the chest and into the wall by the blaster. He is mortally wounded, but attempts to continue fighting, even as he begins to literally melt. Disturbed by the sight, the cons withdraw. His life spent, Smokescreen collapses to the ground. Optimus attempts to comfort his friend as Smokescreen laments that he couldn't protect the Minicons. Optimus reassures him that he knows he did his best, and Smokescreen's spark seems to expire. The Autobots salute their fallen comrade, the kids weep, and Optimus screams to the heavens in rage, the first time that the kids and us have seen him show such an outburst. Optimus cradles Smokescreen's seemingly lifeless shell, and vows that his sacrifice will not be in vain. And with that, with the titular sacrifice, the episode ends. Oh boy, this is a good one. Smokescreen goes out like an absolute Chad, and seeing Optimus break down is incredible.
Equally as incredible is Starscream's breakdown in the rain, where finally, he begins to realize that Megatron and the Decepticons as a whole don't care about him. This will come to a head next episode, as will things with Smokescreen. More than that, Sideways continues his efforts to keep the war going, allowing Megatron to claim the Requiem Blaster, as the Autobots had continually refused to use its power up till now. Yeah, sacrifice is good. Let's move on to Regeneration. We learn that Smokescreen isn't yet dead, as his spark is barely holding on. However, it will require a wholly new body in order to survive. We see a spark for the first time in the show, and the bots tell the humans what it is, something between a heart and a soul. Red Alert is optimistic about the spark's survival, but warns that he might not be able to save it in time. Smokescreen's death is still very much on the table. Red whispers to Smokescreen that he knows he can make it. Hotshot is inconsolable, wanting to make Megatron pay. Back at the base, Megatron gloats over his victory, aiming the weapon at Thrust jokingly before raising it up, saying that Thrust has earned his accolades. Starscream enters, angry, muddy, and damaged. Megatron nonchalantly welcomes him back, and Thrust feigns concern for his comrade. Starscream is having none of it, though, punching Thrust into a wall and then throttling him, demanding to know why he was abandoned. Thrust tries to excuse himself, but Starscream isn't listening. The other cons watch on, Wheeljack concerned, but Demolisher and Cyclonus enjoying seeing Thrust be humbled. Megatron finally stops Starscream from attacking Thrust, ordering him to repair himself. Starscream enters something similar to a CR chamber from Beast Wars, and we see that he's actually formed a bond with the Starsaber minicons. Demolisher enters to take the sword back to Megatron, but Starscream says he'll do it, forcing Demolisher to back off by drawing his sword. Thrust and Megatron begin to scheme again, wondering how else they can use Starscream in the future, as the Seeker has proven resilient. However, their plans are clearly not to reward Starscream, but to use him as something of a meat shield or alloy shield against the Autobots. Starscream overhears this, and he reaches his breaking point. Optimus's words sink in, as do all the events of the show going all the way back to the first episodes. Summoning the Starsaber, Starscream goes on a rampage. The other cons mobilize to stop him, but Scream's rage and the power of the Starsaber allow him to get away. He runs to the warp gate and sets a course for somewhere on Earth. Megatron enters with the Requiem Blaster, attempting to gaslight Starscream by saying that he always suspected the latter would betray him, when it was he who planned to betray Starscream first. However, Starscream isn't listening anymore. We discover that the Starsaber can withstand the power of the Requiem Blaster. Starscream escapes through a hole in the base, going to Earth the long way. An alarm sounds, and Hotshot and Sideswipe mobilize, Hotshot wanting revenge. The other bots notice that Starscream is being pursued by his fellows and are intrigued. Tidal Wave shoots Starscream down. Starscream checks on the minicons to see if they are alright, but then Hotshot and Sideswipe arrive. Starscream tries to warn them, but Hotshot doesn't listen. Hotshot ends up facing off against Tidal Wave while Sideswipe pursues Starscream. Optimus and Jetfire take to the field, powerlinksing. Tidal Wave and Optimus face off, and Starscream decides to help, offering the Starsaber to Optimus. Prime uses the sword to defeat Tidal Wave, who retreats. Starscream surrenders, being taken back to the base, where he reveals that he's chosen to defect. Hotshot doesn't believe him, and Scavenger advocates for him. Jetfire attempts to reason with Hotshot, telling him that his emotions over Smokescreen are clouding his judgment. Hotshot diverts to a different tactic, saying that Starscream's choice to abandon the cons just means he's untrustworthy, seemingly forgetting Scavenger, but he's grieving, so I'll cut him some slack, and lumps Screamer in with Sideways, which Starscream takes offense to. Scavenger points out my point, and Hotshot insists that that's different. Starscream, annoyed and disappointed, turns to leave, but Alexis and Rad note that the Starsaber minicons are backing Starscream up. Optimus decides, then and there, to allow Starscream to join their ranks. Hotshot is annoyed. Starscream offers to share his knowledge of the Decepticon base, and the other bots begin to come around to the idea, but Hotshot remains dissatisfied. Red Alert continues working on Smokescreen and smiles at what appears to be a heartbeat. Hotshot challenges Starscream to a duel, and Starscream chooses to honor it. The two begin to grapple each other, and the minicons report the fight to the bots. The bots bicker about how to stop it. Then Red enters with news. Outside, the fight continues until it's stopped by a mysterious new bot who throws boulders at the pair. That new bot, transforming into an excavator, fights both of them. Hotshot says he's trying to avenge his friend, and the new bot reveals that he is that friend. Smokescreen, who over the next few episodes will eventually change his name to Hoist. Hoist tells Hotshot that he appreciates his friend's willingness to avenge him, but that fighting Starscream, who Optimus informed him about, isn't the solution. He encourages the pair to reconcile, and the bots re-enter the base. The team gathers at the warp gate, preparing to storm the Decepticon base. And with that, regeneration comes to an end. The main Starscream arc is officially underway, boys, and I couldn't be more excited for it. Hotshot continues his growth journey as well, and my boy Smokescreen lives again. I actually really like how Smokescreen/Hoist is the one to knock the truth into Hotshot, as it was his injuries that spurred his friend to this path of vengeance in the first place. Smokescreen's revival also doesn't feel cheap, as the bot still lost the Requiem Blaster, and it took Red Alert building an entirely new body to save him. The unfortunate thing is that Hoist isn't going to be as big a character going forward. He's still there, but doesn't really get much more focus. All that aside, though, I love Regeneration. It's a great continuation of this storyline, and it's only about to get better. Episode 35, Rescue, begins with Demolisher cleaning up after Starscream's rampage, complaining about his former comrade. Starscream then appears, mocking Demolisher, before the Autobots appear behind him from the warp gate. Starscream reveals that Demolisher's attempt to grab the Starsaber last episode helped him to choose to change sides, as without that interruption, Starscream wouldn't have overheard the scheming that caused him to finally break. Demolisher runs to activate the alarm, succeeding despite Hotshot and Starscream's interference. Megatron and the others react to the alarm, and all but Thrust and Megatron mobilize. As the bots prepare to attack, Optimus reveals that he wants Starscream to show Perceptor where the other minicons are being held, as he has knowledge of the base. Starscream is not much pleased with this assignment, as he wanted to face Megatron personally. Perceptor releases Laserbeak so the kids can watch from back at base. The bots push back the cons and enter the throne room. Megatron, rather than being frightened like his men, is amused, saying that he's looking forward to destroying Optimus with the Requiem Blaster. Starscream then steps forward and Megatron taunts him, calling him an Autobot lapdog. Angry, Starscream prepares to attack. Optimus tells him to stand down, but Starscream won't listen. Taking advantage of his enemy's distraction, Megatron fires at Starscream, calling him an Autobot for the first time. Hoist, remembering the blaster's power, steps in with the Skyboom shield to save Starscream, a pretty neat detail. Concerned that the power of the weapons clashing might cause the roof to collapse, Thrust suggests that Megatron use the distraction to hide and bide his time, while he and the others keep the bots occupied. Megatron vanishes, and Cyclonus wonders who put Mr. Conehead in charge when Thrust takes command of the battle. The fight begins, and Starscream says, "What kind of leader runs and leaves his men to fight alone? You're a coward, Megatron." Laserbeak watches the fight, with the kids and Red Alert watching through his eyes. They notice that Perceptor has run off without his guide and send Laserbeak to find him. Sideswipe rushes in, trying to knock Tidal Wave down. This causes him to be knocked down, and Scavenger mocks his recklessness. Optimus also notices Perceptor's absence and tells Hotshot that since Starscream is too busy looking for Megatron, he should try and find the minicons. Hotshot obeys and goes off. Wheeljack tries to stop him, but Hotshot evades him. Demolisher is seen chasing Perceptor and eventually corners the combined minicon. Fortunately, Laserbeak proves his mettle once more, zapping Demolisher in the eyes. Hotshot knocks the tank con down, and he, Laserbeak, and Perceptor go in search of the minicons. It's revealed that Starscream's blueprint was somewhat insufficient, being less detailed than the team had hoped. Tidal Wave stops Perceptor when he runs ahead of Hotshot. The minicons divide to avoid a stomp attack, and Hotshot rushes in to draw Tidal Wave's fire. Perceptor relinks and runs off with Laserbeak. The two, or four, are able to find the dozens of other minicons, who are being used to construct a ship. Perceptor talks with his brethren, but while he's busy, Megatron enters, attempting to seize the combined minicon. Just when Perceptor seems doomed, the other minicons all stop working and begin to close in on Megatron, all using the same strange song Skyblast used back in Desperate. The kids, Autobots, and Decepticons all react to it as it echoes through the base. Even Leader 1 responds to the song, fritzing out on Megatron's arm. Unable to command the minicons, Megatron grows furious, grabbing Leader 1 and forcefully using him as a weapon. He's prepared to vaporize enough minicons to quell the insubordination, but Hotshot rushes in to save them. Perceptor and Laserbeak lead the minicons out of the chamber, while Megatron fights the annoying yellow Autobot who keeps getting in his way. No, not Bumblebee. Hotshot and Megatron transform and drive off.
Tidal Wave, momentarily being an idiot, tries to follow them, getting stuck in the entrance. Hoist pulls him out, mocking him as he does. Tidal Wave expresses appreciation, then decks his Autobot savior. Sideswipe directs the Minicons to escape through the warp gate while the others hold the cons off. Hotshot's actually holding his own, but not for long. Eventually, Megatron has him dead to rights. Just when all seems lost, who should arrive but Starscream, severing Megatron's cannon with the Starsaber and standing there like a boss. Having quelled their beef, Hotshot and Starscream work together to defeat Megatron. Optimus arrives, telling them that the Minicons have been retrieved and it's time to go. Starscream wants to stay and finish off Megatron, but Optimus tells him that he's been given an order, and it's time to see if he's truly invested in the greater good or just in personal revenge. That it's time to prove who he is at his core, Autobot or Decepticon, because being an Autobot means putting the team first. Back at base, Starscream is angry, but obedient. While the others celebrate their victory, he storms off, still somewhat torn. He despises Megatron, yes, but does he truly believe in the cause of the Autobots? Optimus tells him to take his time and figure it out, and the episode ends. Rescue is very good. The train just keeps chugging along. We are in full-blown storyline mode now. This season has been very light on episodic conflicts, with Runaway and the Past two-parter being the closest to that, though even then not really. And honestly, Armada is at its best when it's in storyline mode. From Sacrifice till Mortal Kombat, the episode, not the video game, it's all one big, continuous story, and I love it. Which brings us to our next episode, and the last episode centered around a Minicon hunt, Mars. Starscream slashes through rocks to get out his anger at both Optimus and Megatron while the kids watch. He ponders, wondering why he's even here. After all, his motivation is revenge, not whatever Optimus wants. The Minicons, Swindle, and the Starsaber ones try to console him, as does Alexis. She's the only one who doesn't run off when he tells her to leave him alone, forcing him to storm off. On the moon, Megatron is also angry, using his own cannon and the Requiem Blaster to destroy rocks of his own. The other cons watch him until Thrust orders them to help build the ship, as their limited number of Minicons, pretty much just the Requiem Blaster ones and their personal partners, aren't sufficient laborers. When Thrust is alone, Sideways begins taunting him from the shadows. He reveals that as powerful as each Minicon weapon is, their true power comes from being used as one. Thrust ponders on this, then turns to ask why Sideways told him, only to discover the Drifter Bot is gone. At first he's skeptical, but then allows himself to actually consider the idea. On Earth, the Minicon alarm sounds, detecting a Minicon on Mars. It's decided that Starscream and Jetfire are the only options for this mission, as they're the only ones who can fly without power linksing, and Blur and Hotshot's flight modes are really more hover modes than anything. Jetfire claims he can do it alone. Optimus is skeptical, but allows it. Hoist hands over the shield to Jetfire, and Starscream tries to accompany him. Jetfire refuses and heads out. Carlos, Billy, and Fred stalk off to do something. When Jetfire reaches the warp gate, which also serves as a launch bay, he's perturbed to discover the three boys dressed in spacesuits, much to the other bots' amusement and Alexis and Rad's irritation. They're denied the chance to go into space, and Jetfire half-heartedly promises to bring them back a souvenir. Then, Starscream arrives, coming along anyway. Thrust tells Megatron about the weapon's potential, but does not deign to reveal where the information came from. They decide that the mission to Mars is the perfect chance to test the theory. Starscream goes on ahead, so Jetfire decides to just look for the Minicon, sending his partner, Commodore, to go looking. Unfortunately, a sandstorm approaches, cutting Jetfire off from communicating with the base. Single-minded as ever, Starscream shouts out for Megatron in the middle of the storm. Unfortunately, the only Decepticon present is Tidal Wave. Starscream is injured and lost in the storm, falling into a canyon. The Minicons attempt to check on him, but he lashes up, telling them to shut up and leave him alone. Seeming to respond to this, they run off. He then laments that even they have abandoned him now. Starscream, the king of emo. He then rants to himself about Megatron and claiming his vengeance, crushing a rock for effect. Within the rock is a small, for him, crystalline structure. The Minicons return, having brought Jetfire and Commodore along. The Vice Commander tries to be polite, offering a hand, but Starscream remains stubborn, telling him to slag off and that the Autobots can't possibly understand him. Jetfire, fed up, cuffs Starscream, saying, "Yeah, I don't understand and I don't want to either," placing him under arrest for insubordination and begins dragging him back to Earth. The kids and other bots protest, but Optimus supports his right hand's actions, saying it's time Starscream faced consequences. Jetfire attempts to get through to Starscream, saying that Autobots work together as a unit, not as a bunch of individuals out for personal gain like the Decepticons. This supports Thrust's earlier observation that the bots are a better team than the cons, as if watching the show wouldn't confirm that anyway. Starscream continues to brush Jetfire off, so the Autobot decides to spare his breath, energy, whatever. Then Starscream spies the new Minicon on a nearby asteroid. The two finally work together to try and save him, but are ambushed by Tidal Wave. Megatron, followed closely by Thrust, warps to the location. Tidal Wave nearly claims the Minicon, but Starscream surprises everyone by telling the Minicon to save himself, that the Autobots will protect him, not use him like the Decepticons. This gets through to the Minicon and he shoots Tidal Wave. Starscream is able to snag the Minicon and store him inside Jetfire's back compartment. Then, Megatron appears, holding the Requiem Blaster. With all three weapons in close proximity and being wielded against each other, a massive energy burst is released. The bots and kids are scared when they lose Jetfire on the comms, but he and Starscream, fortunately, survived. Megatron is knocked unconscious before being awakened by Thrust. The theory has been confirmed. Jetfire reports the strange energy to Optimus, who encourages him to keep it on the DL for now. Red patches up Starscream, and the trio of boys that aren't rad swarm Jetfire, who reveals that he didn't get a souvenir for them. Alexis approaches Starscream and praises his actions. Screamer's still busy being emo, so he storms off again, but we see that he actually did bring back a souvenir for the kids. The crystal rock he crushed earlier. All the kids, except for Rad, for some reason, claim a piece, and Alexis's will be important much later. With that, Mars ends. Despite seeming on the surface like what would be a typical episode back in Seasons 1 and 2, Mars is actually not about the Minicon hunt much. It continues Starscream's story from last episode, as well as continuing to step up the machinations of Sideways and the secret powers of the Minicons. We also see Alexis bonding with Starscream, something that remains vital throughout the rest of the series. Now, we end Starscream's redemption, and see him pull a Prince Zuko. But not Season 3 Zuko, no. Because much like the Fire Nation Prince, redemption, for Starscream, isn't a simple journey of point A to point B. Episode 37, Crack, starts with Sideways and Thrust scheming together. The Drifter's information, having been proven correct twice now, has caused Thrust to begin to consider him an ally, which is ironic considering Thrust was the one who drove him out back in detection. The Autobots begin building their own spaceship in earnest, the Axolon, but Starscream considers it a waste of time, saying that the bots have the upper hand, so it's time to wipe out the cons once and for all. No one agrees, so he storms off. Hotshot tells Optimus that he doesn't know if Starscream will fit in on the team. His Decepticon programming keeps getting in the way. Optimus suggests that perhaps by understanding that programming, the two factions might be able to achieve peace in the future, and that trying to help Starscream adjust and coming to a compromise might just be the entry point to that. Hotshot remains unconvinced. Thrust tells Megatron that he has a plan to claim all three weapons. Starscream walks into a dark room, probably about to sing Evanescence to himself, and is shocked to discover that the kids have thrown him a party to thank him for the Mars rocks. They give him a chamois made of smaller blankets and sheets, intended for polishing himself and his weapons. Starscream doesn't know how to react to the gift, as he's never received anything from someone before. He's uncertain how to respond, so Alexis guides him to say, "Thank you." The words are foreign to him, but he likes the sound. After being aloof and standoffish for so long, he actually begins to warm up to the attention from the kids. Unfortunately, Jetfire arrives in lecture mode. He assigns Scream monitor duty, but the ex-Decepticon initially plans to slack off, letting someone else pick up the pieces. Alexis gently chides him about this, telling him that a team needs all its members to work together. The headway that the kids seem to have made suddenly seems to evaporate. I have something to say here. Even Optimus and Alexis, who have been the most understanding towards Starscream, have failed to understand one thing. Lectures and speeches do not work on him. They just make him clam up and close himself off. However, kindness and patience do work, and those actually seem to pay off, as he ends up doing his monitor duty, though he grouses about it all the while. Now, I'm not going to entirely defend Starscream's actions in this episode. Your choices are still your choices in the end. barring extremely mitigating circumstances, and even then. I mean, I have a whole video on my channel about how Darth Vader is less sympathetic than people like to give him credit for. Anakin still made a choice in the end. But the good guys have already made a few missteps, and are going to make even more. Starscream notices a strange signal on the monitor and flies out to investigate, discovering Thrust waiting for him. The Conehead evades his former colleague's attacks and begins whispering in his ear that he agrees with Starscream that Megatron's time has come. He suggests that the pair can work together to dethrone him from within the Decepticons, and hits the nail on the head that staying with the Autobots isn't going to allow Scream to fulfill his ultimate goal. Billy and Fred stumble upon the meeting, hearing Starscream deny Thrust's offer. Then Thrust suggests that if Starscream wants to weasel his way back into Megatron's favor so he can be more poised to strike him down, he can turn over the Skyboom shield and Starsaber. Starscream refuses again, but Thrust is undeterred, telling Starscream to take his time and consider. Starscream flies off, and the two boys go back to base as well. Sideways emerges and discusses the plan with Thrust, wondering if Starscream is truly the best option for an ally. Thrust insists that he is, and the two chuckle about their secret alliance. Starscream looks at the Skyboom minicons brooding on Thrust's words when Blur asks what he's doing. Screamer makes himself look mega suspicious and says he needs to get to work before hurrying off. Blur, being perceptive, senses something wrong. Starscream wonders why he's doubting himself, torn between the warmth he feels from the kids, the frustration he feels towards his new teammates, and the hatred he feels for Megatron. The three OG kids decide to take the Skyboom minicons for a walk. Billy and Fred report on the encounter with Thrust and how Starscream stood his ground. The other bots are unconvinced, saying that Starscream is no hero. Screamer enters and Sideswipe and Blur praise his actions. Hoist enters, saying that the Skyboom minicons have vanished. Fred remembers that the Skyboom shield was what Thrust offered, and Jetfire, Blur, and Hoist immediately become accusatory. Hotshot, trying to take Optimus' advice, gives Scream a chance to explain, but he fumbles it by being aggressive, convincing Starscream that it doesn't matter either way. The others have already decided his guilt, so why should he even bother? Optimus arrives, but before he can do his thing and defuse the situation, the Decepticons attack. The Autobots counterattack, with Starscream splitting off to confront Thrust. Despite the earlier confrontation with the Autobots, Starscream claims that though the bots won't trust him, he trusts them, and that's more than he can say for Thrust. He wields the Chamois and the Starsaber as he defies Thrust, but the tactician continues to pick apart his arguments. Optimus and Jetfire form Jet Optimus and take on Tidal Wave. Grounded, the Titanic Decepticon pursues Hotshot on foot. The Autobot ducks into a forest where he discovers Rad, Alexis, and Carlos with his Skyboom minicons, proving Starscream's innocence. Hotshot returns to the battlefield with the shield, and Hoist admits that they all owe Screamer an apology. Despite his anger, Starscream can't bring himself to destroy Thrust. When Thrust tells him he's gone soft, Starscream begins to doubt his connection with the kids. After all, he's a Decepticon, isn't he? Hoist launches the shield to Optimus. Starscream knocks Thrust aside and swoops down towards the battlefield. At the last moment, he grabs the shield, shocking everyone. He takes off into the air, abandoning the Chamois, and saying that he doesn't know if he's made the right decision. But right or wrong, he's made his choice, and he has to stick with it until Megatron is destroyed. He bids a heartfelt farewell to the kids, however, saying that he'll never forget them, before warping back to the moon. Crack is a tragic episode. Much like Crossroads of Destiny and Avatar, we have a character on the path to redemption who makes the wrong choice at the 11th hour. These slip-ups, backslides, I always love in redemption arcs. They're so rare, but so realistic. Anyone who's tried to make a life change, whether it be fighting an addiction or choosing a better path, knows that it's rarely a straight line. Even years down the line, a relapse can happen. Dinobot and Beast Wars did much the same, and Starscream shares quite a lot in common with him. Much like my issues with Sideways heel turn in the last season, however, I would have liked more time with Starscream on the bots team. Though Starscream is there for 3.5 episodes as opposed to Sideways not even having one, so it's a definite improvement. And Screamer's story is far from over. Episode 38, Threaten, begins on a somber note. The kids are angry, tossing their Mars rocks on the ground. Only Alexis holds onto hers. Hotshot is also angry, storming off, but it's not just Starscream the young bot is angry at. Megatron is pleased at Starscream's return and all the bounty he has brought. However, Megatron has not forgotten the betrayal, holding the Starsaber to Starscream's face. He then relaxes, though, telling Starscream that he's earned some R&R. He asks Thrust about the project, piquing Starscream's interest. Hotshot is at the firing range, shooting wildly. This is a far contrast to the last time we shot him at the shooting range with Sideswipe. Sideswipe, speaking of him, tries to calm him down, but Jetfire advises they let him get it out. Alexis mopes, being comforted by Sureshock. Thrust orders the other cons to keep working, then sneaks off. Demolisher notices that Starscream is back. Scream follows Thrust into a secluded corridor and gets him in a chokehold. Demolisher sees this and goes to report to Megatron. However, the con leader is content to let them hash it out and tells Demolisher to get back to work. Starscream demands answers from Thrust, who assures him that they are allies, and that the project is something that will combine the powers of all three weapons. Starscream, for the moment, is content with this and walks off. Sideways then emerges and congratulates Thrust. The kids are at home. Alexis looks at her rock, pondering on Starscream. Hotshot tells Optimus that they should act now, before the cons do. Optimus encourages patience, and Jetfire reveals that he's coming up with a plan. When Sideswipe reveals that the cons have sealed their warp gate and that the bot's own would be too risky, Hotshot says that they should finish the Axelon and use that to attack the cons. Jetfire offers to pilot the ship, but Optimus tells him that his anger towards Starscream has clouded his judgment, so he should stay behind. Hotshot is enough of a handful as it is, and Optimus hasn't given up on Starscream just yet. Thrust reveals that the weapon he's been designing is called the Hydra-Cannon, based off of the mythological Hydra, which, in the version that Thrust heard, has 9 heads, corresponding to 9 minicons. Hotshot and Sideswipe keep working on the ship. To distract themselves from Starscream, the kids rush off to watch a comet. The Decepticon ship struggles to launch, forcing them to use more power than expected to escape the moon's gravity. It's successful, but Megatron is displeased at Thrust's failure of calculation, threatening that the Hydra-Cannon's calculations better not be off. Kelly, from vacation, is reporting on the comet. Oh great, I love being reminded of that episode. Kinda surprised she still has a job after all that mess, honestly. Thrust decides that they should test the Hydra-Cannon on the approaching comet, to which Megatron concurs. Thrust continues his characterization of loving signs, pointing out that humans believe comets are ill omens. Megatron orders Starscream to be the one to fire the cannon, as it was he who made it all possible. This is also a test of Starscream's loyalty. The kids watch the comet, but Alexis leaves, depressed. Rad follows her. Starscream presses the button, and the Hydra-Cannon powers up. A beam of immense power is unleashed, nearly knocking the ship itself off course and utterly disintegrating the comet, leaving only a bright beam of light in its wake. Rad tries to comfort Alexis, but the two then notice that the comet exploded, releasing a massive wave of energy that knocks out power at the observatory. The bots spy the ship near the explosion, and Sideways watches on, cackling with glee. Thrust suggests that they return to Cybertron and conquer it, as no power the bots have can match them. But Megatron says that they have unfinished business, and orders Starscream to fire on the Autobot base. Starscream expresses that will destroy Earth in the process, setting up just how powerful the cannon is. But Megatron doesn't care in the slightest. He orders the ship to fly into position, and Starscream struggles internally. With that, we move on to episode 39, the last episode in this arc, Crisis. Threaten is a lot of setup for the finale, but some good stuff regardless. Most of what I want to say, though, I'll say at arc's end, so let's move on. Crisis starts with a strange distortion in the atmosphere as the cons draw near. The kids discuss the strangeness, concluding that Megatron is behind it all, and that they can't do anything more than hope that the Autobots can figure it out. Jetfire scopes out the ship, but Megatron is unconcerned, even making jokes about Thrust, calling him by his third nickname, Squidhead. Thrust is infuriated at the nickname, but Megatron tells him he'll be demoted if he keeps whining, calling him Squidhead again. Jetfire tries to attack the ship, discovering that it's shielded. After another failed attack, Optimus orders him home. Thrust, after another Squidhead, ponders on a nickname for Megatron, settling on Flathead in the English dub and comparing him to a stag beetle in Japanese. He then giggles to himself, and Megatron says one of my favorite lines. David K. reads this so well. "You are a freak." And that's the end of the comedy, boys and metaphorical girls. Strap in. The rest of this thing is pretty intense. The bots try to reason how to destroy the weapon, Optimus revealing the power of the combined 3 weapons and how that must be what's powering it. They know that they have to destroy it without harming the Minicons, but are unsure how. Red Alert reasons that the weapon will destroy at least a third of the Earth, if not more, and that they have to stop it somehow. Optimus says that they'll finalize plans once Jetfire returns, but Hotshot interrupts, blaming Starscream's treachery for this, and even more, blaming Optimus for letting Starscream join the team. He yells at Prime, and the commander leaves silently. Hoist and Scavenger try to get Hotshot to stop, but he keeps ranting about Optimus and Starscream. Optimus, standing alone in the warp chamber, pulls out the Matrix of Leadership, marking its first true appearance, outside a couple brief shots mid-transformation, in the series. He's begun to doubt himself, wondering if he is truly fit to bear the Matrix. His pondering is interrupted by Jetfire's return. Optimus puts together that the cons must have had a reason for not firing on Jetfire. Optimus, putting his own doubts aside, tries to settle Hotshot's mind as well as the others. He tells everyone that he has a plan, and that he's going with Jetfire to deal with this. Hotshot demands to go with them, but Jetfire points out that he can't fly in space or power links with anyone who can. Hotshot petulantly keeps trying to go anyway until he's stopped by Optimus. Prime turns and reveals the Matrix. He tells Hotshot that it bears the wisdom, or data, of all past primes, and asks Hotshot to hold on to it for him. Hotshot, confused and still a little angry, refuses. Optimus accepts this refusal and returns the Matrix to his chest. He and Jetfire then warp away, being wished luck by everyone, even Hotshot. Starscream struggles with what he's being asked to do, and Megatron confronts this, asking if he can truly trust his wayward soldier. Thrust urges Starscream to answer in the affirmative, otherwise their plan to usurp Megatron will end before it began. The ship enters range and Jet Optimus draws closer. The cannon is nearly powered up and the shield lowered. Megatron orders Starscream to fire, but the choice is taken out of his hands by Jet Optimus attacking the ship. Megatron orders the Decepticons to take out Optimus and thrust to get the cannon ready. Optimus and Jetfire unlink. The Vice Commander takes on the cronies while Optimus attacks the cannon itself. Jetfire sees Starscream and gets angry. Tidal Wave attacks Optimus, and both Jetfire and Starscream react in alarm. Starscream feigns an attack on Jetfire, allowing himself to be thrown into Tidal Wave's back, saving Optimus. Megatron, infuriated by his minions, takes to the field. He enters full blast mode and peppers Optimus with blaster fire. Jetfire is triple-teamed by Demolisher, Wheeljack, and Cyclonus. The Hydra-Cannon is fully charged, and Megatron forces Optimus to watch it fire. Optimus, desperate, uses the power of the Matrix to free himself from Megatron's grip and float in front of the cannon. We then see just how powerful Armada Optimus Prime is. The Hydra-Cannon has a power level comparable to the Death Star from Star Wars. And what's Prime about to do? He tanks the beam personally, holding it back from reaching Earth. Not only that, but he redirects the beam back at the ship, damaging it severely and rendering the Hydra-Cannon useless. The Earth is saved. The Hydra-Cannon disabled. Megatron foiled. All is well, right? Wrong. As the light from the blast fades, we see Optimus, ash white, floating in space. The heroes celebrate, but it's premature. Optimus Prime is dead, and his body begins to disintegrate before their very eyes, leaving behind only space dust and Sparkplug, clutching the Matrix as he floats through space. Everyone is shocked and dismayed. The bots, the kids, Starscream, even Megatron, who lets out an agonized scream of Optimus, rivaled only by Jetfire's screams. The remains of the great Optimus Prime rain down over the Earth, heralding a sacrifice that most on the planet will never hear of. How one being stood between Earth and destruction. How he gave his life, every ounce of his power, and his very spark to save this tiny little rock and the people who dwell on it, his own men as well as humanity. And on that tragic note, Arc 3 comes to a close. Oh boy, that got heavy. Of the many, many, many deaths of Optimus Prime, this is one of my favorites. The G1 final battle in the 86 movie is iconic, but it lacks something this one and the others I adore have. Self-sacrifice. In 86, it was a final knockdown drag-out brawl between two hated enemies, which, again, is fantastic. But here, Optimus tanks a Death Star laser to save countless lives. Autobot, human, Minicon, animal, all of them. It was such an unexpected moment that even Megatron, who moments earlier was gloating about the potential of the Autobots' destruction, was disturbed. Scott McNeil as Jetfire puts in such a gut-wrenching performance in his anguished cries that it makes one tear up. Optimus had begun to doubt himself, so he did what primes do. He took a bullet meant for someone else, and went out like an absolute legend. But the story doesn't end here. Oh no. Arc 3 is incredible. Sans Runaway. The continued build-up towards what we all know is coming is excellent. Starscream's entire story is both heartwarming and tragic. Hotshot is continued to be forced to grow up, and even Optimus gets quite a bit of development. Sideways continues his machinations, even more so after being cast out of the Decepticons, eventually being joined by Thrust. Tidal Wave, Wheeljack, and Sideswipe join the cast. Smokescreen is slagged, then reborn. The full potential of the Minicons is seemingly realized. And Optimus Prime sacrifices himself for Earth. Little did we know back then that this tale had only just begun. The arc ends on tragedy, but with the promise of a new tomorrow. How does that tomorrow go? Find out next time. As always, thank you all for joining me on my quest. If you like what I do here, like this video, comment down below to help the algorithm, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you'd like to support the channel further, Patreon and YouTube memberships are available. All that being said, I will see you all on our next adventure, whenever that may be.